welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers. You're in Season 5 of Wrestling at Random, where the theme is more wrestling than ever. We dumped promotions, matches, shows, everything that had never been in the randomizer before. They're in there for Season 5, upwards of 19,000 professional wrestling shows, 60,000 or so hours of professional wrestling in the randomizer. And what it did for us this week is something it's done several times this season. It pulled a show for us from a promotion that we have never reviewed, whether it be in the previous 4 seasons of this podcast or the 150, 160 some odd episodes on the bonus feed. We are going to be reviewing an episode of UWF Fury Hour, that being Herb Abrams' UWF. That's right, that Herb Abrams.
And that UWF, not to be confused with the attempt to rebrand Mid-South Wrestling in a push for national expansion and eventual merging with Jim Crockett Promotions. None of that. This is the
Also, we should mention, not to be confused with UWF in Japan. You will not find Akira Maeda or Nobuhiko Takada anywhere on this show.
No UWF, no UWFI. This is a totally different UWF. The Fury Hour, episode number 22. Did you get a date on when this aired by any chance?
I did not, but I can look it up while
I can tell you when this was. I'll tell you when this was actually recorded. So this was part of a TV taping that was actually filmed across different tapings that was put together into a show. I can tell you the main event of the show was filmed March 10th of 1991 at the Penta Hotel in New York City. So
the Penta Hotel, you say?
That's correct.
El Zero Meadow,
or not to be confused with the Pennsylvania. That's the right across the street from Madison Square Garden. If you didn't know, that's where they ran their other big shows. We'll get to that in a minute, but first.
I do not, by the way, I cannot find a date for the airtime for the show. It is insane, though. This TV taping, I'm looking 10, 15.
Oh, yeah, it was nuts.
20, 24 matches on this TV taping.
So we're in 1991. Let's talk about Herb Abrams for a minute. So you mentioned this is Herb Abrams, UWF. Herb Abrams was a longtime wrestling fan based out of New York. Dave Meltzer, Wrestling Observer newsletter, writes that Abrams ran a clothing store and burst onto the wrestling scene in 1989 at a John Arezzi fan convention in New York, announcing the formation of his new federation that was going to, quote, put the WWF out of business.
A lofty goal.
He started a wrestling promotion called the Universal Wrestling Federation in 1989. Abrams did manage to get television on some cable stations and had some major league talent from the start, including Dr. Death Steve Williams, Bam Bam Bigelow, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. They even had Bruno Sammartino doing television commentary. We'll talk more about that later. He started stiffing some wrestlers that he was mad at on pay almost immediately, among them being the Honky Tonk Man, Louis Spicolli, a practice that Herb Abrams would later be known for with stiffing these wrestlers. He built up for a pay-per-view show on June 9th, 1991 at the Manatee Civic Center in Palmetto, Florida, with Dr. Death Steve Williams versus Bam Bam Bigelow on top of that card. That pay-per-view, which we will reference throughout this review because they were trying to build up to this show, that show ended up drawing 550 fans live. But it was not a bad pay-per-view. There's been far worse pay-per-views in history.
Well, I mean, you just think about having Steve Dr. Death Williams and Bam Bam Bigelow in the main event at a time period where basically Dr. Death was one of the top foreigners in all Japan, and Bam Bam Bigelow had done in the not too recent past some big time stuff in New Japan.
So even though it wasn't a horrible show, it did do a horrible buy rate. It was amongst some of the lowest buy rates ever for pay-per-view.
So obviously this show took place in Palmetto, Florida at the Manatee Event Center. One of the other suggested venues, the main suggested venue, it was a suggestion from Howard Brody, who Herb Abrams had hired. He was the owner of Ladies Major League Wrestling. He had hired Howard Brody to help him expand the UWF into Florida. Brody was entrusted with finding a venue for the promotion's first pay-per-view event. He suggested the Odeum in Chicago, suburban Chicago, Illinois, which would go on to host Anarchy Rules some 8 years later. I believe the biggest crowd in ECW history. Herb Abrams said no, and instead wanted to have it, as he said, the Manatee Civic Center in Palmetto, Florida.
550 fans. I bet even a UWF card could have drew better at the Odeum in Villa Park, Illinois.
Windy City Wrestling Battle of the Belts was drawing 3 times that much for horrible stuff.
So after that time, after that big failure of a show, he disappeared from the scene for a while. And then he started running a few more tapings. Then he'd disappear again. And the trend continued for the next 5 years. To his credit, he pulled off several major coups for a promoter of his level, such as getting a fair amount of cable penetration at times for his television show. He did run a pay-per-view show that wasn't all that bad, and he was able to con a major casino into co-promoting a television special in Las Vegas.
Yeah, the Blackjack Brawl. I was going to mention that even though the Beach Brawl was their only pay-per-view, they did have a live special on Sports Channel America on September 23rd, 1994. So 3+ years after this disaster of a pay-per-view, Herb Abrams was still giving it a go.
There's a dark side of the ring that covers Abrams' personal life as well. So we highly recommend always going and checking out Dark Side of the Ring, one of the best shows, one of the best ones. You'll enjoy the Herb Abrams one. They go in depth about his personal life. We'll fast forward to July 23rd of 1996. So 5 years after the show we're going to review here, police were called about an emotionally disturbed person. He was going on a spree, bashing up furniture on several floors of the building with a baseball bat, pulling fire alarms at about 6 a.m. He was paranoid that there were listening devices in his office. He was high on cocaine and Valium. Police found Abrams naked, covered with baby oil, and 2 women in his office. Abrams was 41 years old. He stopped breathing after being handcuffed by police in the office. His office was at 7 Penn Plaza in Manhattan. He was taken to the hospital, where he was later declared dead again at age 41. So if you want more details about Herb Abrams, highly recommend the Dark Side of the Ring.
They also go quite in depth on the pay-per-view and the disaster of the pay-per-view and everything led up to it. So yeah, that's definitely a good companion piece for what we're going to be talking about here, because this episode of UWF Fury Hour, while it was taped in March, this is on the, we're pretty close in terms of when it aired, I believe, to when the pay-per-view is going to take place.
Yeah, like I mentioned, this is the Penta Hotel. They did a couple of TV tapings here. Craig DeGeorge with Bruno Sammartino welcome us to the show. That's our announce team.
That Craig DeGeorge from the WWF, Craig Minervini, as he is known by on his birth certificate, a hockey announcer of some repute as well. But yes, Craig DeGeorge and Bruno Sammartino in 1991 calling UWF professional wrestling. This will be interesting.
So Herb Abrams voices over a rundown of the cards, a rundown of the stars we're going to see. And first he explains Terry Gordy is making his UWF debut. And as they're running down this card and each of the stars you're going to see, they're doing it in the slowest way possible. This person will be here. We get a clip Then they pause on a graphic of them.
With their height and weight.
And then wash, rinse, repeat over and over again. This was excruciating to watch.
It felt like padding time. We should also mention the actual open for the show was really lame. I feel like even late stage Southern territories had better opens for their television show than the UWF did here. We then get Herb Abrams screaming about the UWF at the end of this video intro, and he sounds exactly like Vince McMahon. Exactly like a screaming Vince McMahon. We get tons of shots of New York City, and then it's always awkward looking back and you see shots of the World Trade Center. It's sort of like helicopter stock footage as they go into Manhattan and we go into the building. Yeah, we're told that Terry Gordy will debut. The tag team of Wet n Wild, Sunny Beach, and Steve Ray will be here. B. Brian Blair will be in action. In 1991, Afa the Wild Samoan will be doing professional wrestling, and he will be wrestling Don the Rock Morocco.
We get a commercial to call Captain Lou's 900 line. Only $2 per minute to hear Captain Lou rant and rave.
That in and of itself, like, it's just such a little thing. But the second I saw $2, I'm like, you were a terrible businessman. You always say $1.99. So the $1.06, and it's 1-900-909-9900 costs $1.99. It didn't cost $2. But you could also call 1-900-LOU4U. That's Captain Lou's rap line. There's a lot of Lou Albano on this show.
We get our first promotional commercial for the UWF's first pay-per-view, the Beach Brawl we talked about coming June 9th. They will crown the Sports Channel TV champion. So these shows were airing on like sports channels regionally.
Yes. So I'm sure they were getting preempted a lot.
The vibe I was getting watching this show, it reminded me of that 1993 Eastern Championship Wrestling shortly before they became ECW and Extreme Championship Wrestling, when they were on the Sports Channel Philadelphia, and it was this is in a hotel ballroom that's in a more of a bingo hall establishment, but you get I got similar vibes of Eastern Championship Wrestling and UWF being in similar positions.
Yeah, no, totally. It has that vibe. Almost, granted, this was more of a major national promotion I'm going to mention, but it also had vibes of TNA, Fox Sports era. Being on the syndicated, or not the syndicated, being on the regional sports network, where in one network it might air Tuesday at 4:00, but in another city it might air on their regional sports network at Friday at 3 a.m. Like, there was no real consistency.
So the Sports Channel TV champion may or may not show up at the TV, maybe preempted. His matches might not be on the show. And we go to the ring for the debut of Terry Bam Bam Gordy. Terry Gordy comes out to Motley Crue's Looks That Kill. And you
mentioned this show. Is it March 10th that this show is taped?
That is correct.
So
that's when the main event was taped.
So 2 days prior to this taping, if we are to believe that Terry Gordy, that was from the same taping, 2 days prior to this, Terry Gordy and Steve Dr. Death Williams defeated the Blackhearts in All Japan Pro Wrestling at Tochigi City Gymnasium in front of 4,600 people.
The Blackhearts showed up on some of these UWF cards when I was going through and looking at other shows within these tapings. The Blackhearts were part of these tapings. We didn't get it, randomizer.
I remember seeing pictures of the Blackhearts in the wrestling magazines from these UWF tapings, and they were one of those teams, one of those acts that you never saw, but you built up in your mind what they were from seeing them in the magazines. We should also note that we have, I believe, in one of the All Japan TV shows we've reviewed in the free feed several seasons ago, an All Japan TV show where the Blackhearts made an appearance and got obliterated by Stan Hansen, I believe.
So Terry Gordy's opponent, he's taking on a man named Captain Bad with 2 D's, B-A-D-D, Captain Bad. This is the best jobber name ever.
It is the best jobber name ever. This man does not look like a captain, nor does he look like a bad or Captain Bad. The story of this match and the story of almost all the jobbers on this show is that they are barely trained. Like, the jobbers on this show look like, not like the good celebrity wrestlers like Bad Bunny or someone like that just takes it up and just is amazing right out of the box, but your terrible celebrity wrestler who gets trained for a week and can't do anything. That is the level all these guys are at. If you follow us on social media, you've seen the GIF for this week's show, which is Terry Gordy. After about 3 minutes of this guy not knowing what to do and not going up for anything, Terry Gordy just beating the holy hell out of this man in the corner with clubbing forearms and knees and elbows. That, like, can you imagine Terry Gordy going from wrestling in all Japan? Like, he's for 3 weeks out of the month, he's over there. It is the best wrestling in the world. He is wrestling the best wrestlers in the world, even though the black arts aren't necessarily that. He's in there with Misawa, Kawada, Kobashi, Taue, all these guys. And then he comes over here and he's wrestling Captain Bad. He had no time for this guy.
Let's see if you know who Captain Bad was.
He's under a mask. We should mention that. He's a mask jobber.
I had to look him up. According to Cage Match, he was WWF jobber Mike Williams, and he also wrestled in Global as Mike Lane.
Global, I'm sure I saw, because I ran home from junior high.
So I was like, maybe Adam remembers a Mike Lane from Global.
I need to look Mike Lane from Global up now and see if because I'm sure unless it was very late stage Global where I feel like it didn't even air half the time on ESPN, I'm sure I'd recognize him. He seems like a guy who would be a replacement in the rock and roll RPMs.
So Bruno's talking up Gordy pretty big. He's talking about how big of a star in Japan Gordy is and what a big deal he is. And Gordy just runs him over with a shoulder block. Captain Bad tries a crossbody, but Gordy catches him, throws him down. Hard knees to the head. He just completely takes this guy's head off with a clothesline to the corner. Gordy with a power bomb wins a quick squash match. And we get a Gordy promo after where he says he's going to get some titles.
You get this Gordy promo. There's a better Gordy promo coming up later that had me cackling. By the way, I was able to look up on YouTube. Apparently, there is a Mike Lane global match. Mike Lane versus Calvin Knapp is up on YouTube. So there you go. Maybe on the bonus feed, someone will request that. Maybe we'll get a Mike Lane curated list from one of our
curated
patrons.
List of Captain Bad.
Captain Bad in all his forms.
You mentioned our Patreon. That's how you can support the show, is over at patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom. There we do an extra bonus episode every single week of the podcast. There's over 150 plus episodes at the time of this recording. So if you go sign up for 1 month, it unlocks over 150 episodes you haven't heard. If you're listening in linear fashion, you got a little preview of what it's like in the bonus feed. We put up a bonus feed exclusive episode. We put that up in the free feed to show all you freeloaders what you could be getting over at the Patreon, all the additional bonus content there. Including,
every once in a while, guests. We've had Dr. Keith Lipinski on an episode of the bonus feed talking about his time in
Wrestling Society X.
Wrestling Society X, WSX, and then on the episode that you just referenced from our bonus feed that we put up in the free feed last week, if you're listening in linear fashion, we had Mike Sempervive, our close longtime personal friend and my other podcast co-host at the Big Audio Nightmare, helped us review a patron-selected episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling.
Back to this show. You mentioned B. Brian Blair is here in 1991. B. Brian Blair is taking on Brian Donahue.
B. Brian Blair looks exactly the same in 1991 that he does when he's one of the guys interviewed on episodes of Dark Side of the Ring or Tales from the Territories in the last couple of years. Like, he looks like from the time he was in the WWF as one half of the Killer Bees till 1991 here, he looks like he aged 20 years. But then he just stopped completely. Oh, that, by the way, it's a rare subset of Fashion Corner called Aging Corner on this podcast.
We do that a lot, yes. The 900 number that keeps scrolling at the bottom is annoying. It is too large to be a crawl, and it's
Yes.
taking up an obscene amount of real estate on this TV. And I can't imagine watching this on a 4x3 box television, how much of the screen this crawl is taking up. It's just so annoying, and it's on every match for a long time.
Yeah, it's up way too much. The font is too big. It's obviously far less important than this, but it reminded me of when you'd watch Japanese TV wrestling from the 80s and 90s. Particularly, I feel like you'd see it more on the New Japan shows. They'd have the long crawl that would go on forever, and they were earthquake alerts.
Mm-hmm.
But that's important. This is not.
Blair shows off some amateur wrestling early, and Craig DeGeorge talks about he's talking about all the nice things that Brian Blair does in the community, including, quote, he talks to ill people.
That feels like the lowest bar to clear. I also feel like there may have been a bit more explanation that would have made that sound a bit more impressive. In terms of the commentary on this, Bruno Sammartino is so excited that Brian Donahue played for the New York Jets.
Oh, yeah.
Brian Donahue wrestles like a guy that played football for the New York Jets. He has almost no idea what he's doing. Also, he has an odd visual mix of Kurt Hennig and Dan Spivey. It really threw me off, but he has no idea what he's doing.
Terrible. He is terrible.
He hits the worst spine buster you've ever seen, and then just takes a stroll around the ring. He's not like appealing to the crowd. He's not doing taunts. He just walks around the ring, and Bruno Sammartino is disgusted by the lack of urgency that one Brian Donahue is showing. This man has zero professional wrestling sense whatsoever.
No, he did two moves. He does an atomic drop and then like an elbow drop, and both these moves were horrendous. And then, he did a even worse clothesline right afterward too. This clothesline was just unwatchable. What is happening here?
Well, what was worse than that was the elbow drop he threw.
Horrible.
Terrible. Even at this point, both Craig DeGeorge and Bruno are just openly ripping on this guy's wrestling ability, just saying how horrible this elbow drop looked. Brian Blair, it's a knee drop after a clothesline, a big power slam, and then the most oddly applied scorpion deathlock this side of Davey Boy Smith.
Yeah, if I gave you 100 guesses what B. Brian Blair's finisher was going to be, would you have thought the scorpion deathlock?
The Greek scorpion is what they called it for some reason. There's a fan holding up a Brian Blair t-shirt, which answers the question, did anyone ever make a merch of Brian Blair? Apparently so. That is not the t-shirt I was focused on, however. They showed, for a long time, considering it was not merch of the promotion or watching, a guy in the front row losing his mind wearing Steiner Brothers t-shirt and hat. That is the same t-shirt and hat that I bought less than a year later at my first wrestling show at the UIC Pavilion.
I saw that t-shirt and hat, and I also owned that t-shirt and hat as well.
Nice. Yep.
So,
I remember I bought it. I wore it to school the Monday after I went to the show. I was so hyped. By the way, if you follow us on YouTube, I don't know if this is a hook or not, or if this is telling you not to go, but one of the things I like to do is I like to try to wear a shirt that is relevant to the week's show, the show that we're watching, a wrestler, a promotion. I unfortunately do not have that B. Brian Blair t-shirt from the UWF or any of the t-shirts we're going to talk about in the commercials coming up. However, the closest thing I could come up with, considering we're on the road to Beach Brawl, is my WCW Beach Blast 1992 t-shirt. So you can check us out on YouTube and see that.
Just search for Wrestling at Random Podcast. Give us a like, subscribe there. You can consume your podcast via YouTube. Also a great place to interact with the show as well. We love hearing all your comments and feedback, and we love we will answer every single one of them. So we definitely love everyone who's over following us on the YouTube. Even if you consume it via audio, throwing a like and subscribe over there helps us work the algorithm so other wrestling fans can find the show as well.
What we've found, and I know this is a universal experience with users on YouTube, is that the YouTube comment section is the most positive place on earth.
It actually is for us.
It's bizarre.
People find this show, they like this show, they tell us how much they're enjoying it, and we love to hear that. Helps us keep coming back to do it every single week when the randomizer pulls things like the UWF. So we get a promo now from the Golden Greek John Tolos. I can't remember. Was that AWA show the last time we saw John Tolos?
I believe so. We had an old John Tolos match from back in the day where he really was the Golden Greek. We have not gotten anything, I believe, unless maybe on one of the prime times of John Tolos in his brief time managing as the coach with that goddamn whistle, managing Kurt Hennig.
Yeah.
But here it's, all the promos are green screen, classic late 80s, early 90s green screen promos with the UWF logo in the background. He's cutting a promo about how great he is. And then he's talking about how the TV champion will be exclusively crowned on Sports Channel America or whatever this is. And then right as he's saying that, they put up a graphic correcting him, saying that the title will be crowned on the pay-per-view on Cablevision. And then he says the UWF is, quote, bringing 50s style wrestling back, unquote. And I don't know if in the early 90s, that is what you wanted to be saying to hook people as the alternative when you're trying to put the WWF out of business.
In 1991, you're trying to put WWF out of business. And yeah, your hook is, the 50s and 60s, bringing it back, running it back. It's like saying, hey, we're bringing back 90s Attitude Era or ECW here in 2024.
No, it's like if you were on Dynamite and Tony Khan said, we're bringing Hillbilly Jim style wrestling back. Watch us instead of the WWE. It went about as well as that would have gone.
So the UWF Power Products were shown super weight gain and high octane, all kinds of protein shakes, etc. They eat a whole line of UWF Power Products.
We then have the Golden Greek. John Tolos is here with his beautiful Midnight Express limo. No, Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton are not inside the limo. That is the name of this limo company. There are refreshments. There is a color television in this limo in 1991. And for all you young people out there, color televisions, even small size screen ones, were really freaking big. So it's a pretty big deal. They were able to get this into the limo.
Yeah, John Tolos is yelling about this limousine. He's not telling you about the limousine. He's screaming a wrestling promo, yelling about the limousines.
My take from this is that John Tolos is incapable of speaking in any other way but 50s, 60s, 70s wrestling promo style in any situation in life.
We go to Captain Lou's corner. Terry Gordy is his guest. He says, I'm not the best wrestler in the world, but I can wrap chairs around people's heads better than anyone in wrestling.
He was also lying because
Gordy,
he was
promo.
Damn close to being the best wrestler in the world in 1991.
100%. And then Albano rants, and he says so many words, all the words. And then at the end of it, I'm like, he didn't say anything, but he's really still pretty good at being Lou Albano and ranting and raving.
The number of words here was akin to a Bob Dylan song or a Bruce Springsteen song off his first album, Greetings from Asbury Park. The best part about this is that Captain Lou Albano, as he's just going on and on and on, just saying wacky rhyming things that don't make any sense, Terry Gordy is struggling in the background to not crack up. I believe the kids would call it corpsing is what was happening here. This wasn't quite feeling oozy levels of nearly losing it, but he is coming so close to just completely breaking down. And then at the end, Terry Gordy just channels the character of Devon Dudley some years before he actually existed and says, testify at the end of this.
We go back to the ring.
No, before that, we have the buy the UWF support our troops shirt.
Oh, that's
we
right.
then have a promo for Bruno Sammartino's book where you send a check or money order to Bruno Book. We then have a Captain Lou Albano promo for Beach Brawl. Then we get a promo for Sports Channel America's block of television, which was wrestling, boxing, and kickboxing called Feet, Fists, and Fury. Which, I don't know. I don't know if that would fly as well now. The whole feet thing is a deal, I guess, but I don't know. This is weird.
I feel like we didn't have that in Chicago. We didn't. I would have remembered a Sports Channel block of Feet, Fists, and Fury.
I would have watched the Feet, the Fists, and the Fury. I was a fan of wrestling, kickboxing, and boxing at that point. It couldn't have been preempted by Blackhawks home games because we didn't get those in 1991.
No. For those not in the Chicago market, Blackhawk home games were not televised. But in 1991, they did, because the team was actually good. They went to the Stanley Cup final in 92. They had Hawk Vision, where you could, instead of getting the games on Sports Vision or Sports Channel, they moved to Hawk Vision, where you could, it was like pay-per-view.
It was pay-per-view. They did it late in the season and then into the playoffs, pay-per-view home games.
So, yeah, marketing dynamos, those Chicago Blackhawks of the 90s.
Yeah, when the new regime took over in 2007, they were deemed marketing geniuses because they came up with the idea, show the games on television.
2007.
AD.
Back to pro wrestling, where Afa the Wild Samoan, speaking of what? This guy's still wrestling? Afa the Wild Samoan.
He's delivering on the promise of Coach John Tolos here. That is what Afa the Wild Samoan is doing.
He's accompanied to the ring by Samu. And I'm like, they had to have gotten that wrong. And Samu's wrestling and he's accompanied by Afa, right?
This begs the question, why the hell is Samu not the one wrestling in 1991? The Samoan SWAT team member, the future head shrinker, instead he is managing Afa in 1991.
You would remember Afa the Wild Samoan from Body Slam the movie, which we reviewed over in the bonus feed as well. That's worth your $5 right there.
Our patron got a deal. They got me to not only watch, but review a movie for only $5 American. We have to change that. We have to rectify that. I need to get paid more if I'm going to watch a movie. For new listeners, I hate movies.
That's a separate podcast. Go listen to the bonus feed for that one. Here, Afa the Wild Samoan is taking on The Rock. Don Morocco, the magnificent Morocco, is here. He comes out to the Hawaii Five-0 theme song by The Ventures. I was cheering on my couch. What a great theme song for Don Morocco.
I also love that UWF is on the, I guess you could call it the ECW plan, but it's sort of like the Puerto Rico plan or the Lucha plan, where they just use all the popular music and just don't pay for it.
Samu jumps Morocco and the Samoans are double teaming him.
And the ref does nothing about this. These refs, by the way, are, again, delivering on the promise of John Tolos. These men, there is no way they are south of 80 years old. Each referee, they also, we'll hear their names later, they have delightful old man names.
Yes, they would call Bronco Lubitsch a young whippersnapper.
Yes, Gorilla Monsoon couldn't even call these guys youngsters.
So Sammartino is on the call during this complete mugging before the match by Samu and Afa of Morocco. And Sammartino with the most low energy. Oh, he's attacking Morocco. Like, no effort from Sammartino here to put this over as an attack.
Yeah, there are moments where Bruno seems invested in the show. This was not one of those moments. It's also just wild to see Don Morocco in 1991, and even more wild to see him as a babyface. This is a total no bumps match. We get a double noggin knocker that kind of works on the Samoans, which completely took me out of the match because that doesn't work. Also, Craig DeGeorge, There's multiple times where guys get posted on the floor, and Craig DeGeorge calls it the steel pipe.
He does multiple times. Yeah,
it's like when Kevin Kelly calls the barricade or the guardrail, he calls it the fence, and it always takes me out of it. The steel pipe for the post.
They're brawling outside the ring. All three men are fighting, and the bell rings as Morocco gets posted. He wins by disqualification because of all the interference from Samu. Nothing else to note here.
This was bad. That's what to note about
bad.
This. It was terrible. Again, no bumps match. It was exactly what you'd expect, I guess, from Afa and Don Morocco doing a match in a hotel ballroom in 1991.
We go to a segment called Ask the Wrestler, where Don Brinza asks the ace cowboy Bob Orton, why can't you win on your own? You always need outside interference. They cut to Orton's response, and he says that Tolos is just there to provide advice, and he's not there for interference.
I love the line that Bob Orton has at the beginning of this, ripping on this fan, saying, Danny boy, you must be sitting in front of the TV with one eye closed and an eye patch over the other one.
Now we get the highlight of the show for me. Mr. Wonderful does a commercial. And I started to take notes on the commercial, and I stopped and I just hit record, and I said, nope, putting Orndorff in here to tell us all about the product.
Hey, you little Mr. Wonderfuls out there. You think Mr. Wonderful got to look like this by eating wimp food like cheeseburgers, french fries, and quiche? Get real. A talented, serious athlete like me needs real nutrition. So I drink Joe Weider's Dynamic Muscle Builder. It's got high-quality protein, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, and other important stuff I need to beat, meet my opponent in the ring. And it tastes great, too. And it's just like a thick, rich milkshake. Joe Weider's Dynamic Muscle Builder. Tough nutrition for us tough athletes. And here's the number.
Okay, Paul, to order, call 1-800-368-4UWF.
I love that he says, hey, you little Mr. Wonderfuls out there. That just cracked me up. And then also, as we just heard, him saying that he didn't get this way by eating cheeseburgers and quiche.
Cheeseburgers, French fries, and quiche.
My big question, other than, like, why have we not seen wacky 90s Paul Orndorff babyface before? My biggest question coming out of all of these things, this, the power line, the Bruno book, all these different things. There's supposedly different companies selling these things. All of them have the same address that you mail your check to. 702 Washington Street, Marina Del Rey in California. I feel like this is just a small window into the scammy, sleazy nature of Herb Abrams' UWF.
We hear the sounds of MC Hammer's You Can't Touch This play as Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff comes out to the ring.
What a combination of wrestler and entrance music. Seeing a babyface, somewhat slimmed down Mr. Wonderful coming out to MC Hammer's You Can't Touch This is the most incongruent wrestler to music thing I've ever seen.
His opponent, Carmine Albano.
Carmine Albano. Is he supposed to be
Is
related?
He a relative? He's got to be, right? Like, that's we'll have to look that up. But John Tolos is here on commentary as well.
We haven't gotten enough of him yet.
He's here to tell, and by talking we mean yelling, because that's the only way John Tolos can communicate. He's screaming and ranting about the next match that's coming up after this match. Orndorff wins this nothing match quickly with a pile driver, and it was actually a great pile driver.
A great jumping pile driver from Orndorff. Orndorff looked incredible here. He's still in very good shape, but he's not overly bulky. He is moving. It's so crazy to see him slim down like this, because he would be in WCW a year or two later and would be really, really big and jacked up again. But he's moving.
We're told that next week there will be a cage match between Paul Orndorff and Dr. Death Steve Williams. Adam, the randomizer has done it again. It's off by 1 week again. It always does this to us.
It's all I could think about as we go through this video package. They do an incredible job of showing us everything leading to this cage match. The violent, bloody brawls, the lumberjack matches, refs getting knocked down, weapons being used. This is tremendous. I am legitimately hyped for this cage match that we do not get to see on this show. This is another one of those, as we always say, if you wonder if the randomizer is legit, if it's not gimmicked, it definitely is not gimmicked. Like that one that gave us the Mid-South episode before Flair DiBiase. Here, this gives us UWF before what looked to be an awesome cage match.
Yeah, this was a great recap. We always, when we parachute into a show, how good are you at catching us up on what's going on? And yeah, I was hyped. I wanted to see that match. I wanted to see Dr. Death, 1991 Dr. Death in a cage taking on Paul Orndorff. That would have been great.
I enjoyed during the recap, they're showing clips from previous matches they had against each other. At one point, Dr. Death has the Canadian backbreaker, that over-the-shoulder backbreaker. And Bruno, we talk about Bruno sometimes sounding invested, sometimes not. He perks up. He's so excited to see someone using his old move that never gets used anymore. Thank God we had this video package first, though, or at all. Because when we get to this Dr. Death promo, we are reminded that Dr. Death, Steve Williams, is many things. He's an incredible athlete,
He is.
Incredible football player, incredible amateur wrestler, great professional wrestler, one of the best foreigners of all time in Japan. What he is not, though, is a promo man.
No, he cuts his promo for next week's cage match. Not good. Just you already had me sold. I just needed Dr. Death yelling like, "I'll see you next week," and move on.
The one thing I do appreciate, though, it's a very late 80s, early 90s non-WWF promo crutch phrase that some guys would use. Doc calls Mr. Wonderful at least 4 times in this short promo. He calls him Pally, and I love that.
We see a commercial with Paul Orndorff again for Joe Weider's Super Arm Blaster.
The Total Arm Blaster. And you guessed it, even though this is Joe Weider's Total Arm Blaster, the address is 702 Marina Drive or whatever.
In Marina Del Rey, California.
Everything. 702 Washington Street, Marina Del Rey, California. It raised my hackles. My alarms went up. Then we have the Power Shack Gym. Again, in theory, a separate corporate entity from the UWF or Joe Weider's Total Arm Blaster, is selling rare rag t-shirts, and you guessed it, 702 Washington Street, Marina Del Rey.
We go back to the hotel ballroom where we hear the sounds of the Black Crows, hard to handle, as Cactus Jack comes out with his tag team partner, the Ace Cowboy Bob Orton. They are managed by John Tolos. They come out
if
to
you're
the
keeping
ring.
track, this is the 4th segment on this 1-hour show, this Fury Hour that has featured the Golden Boy, the Golden Greek, John Tolos in 1991.
Their opponents, you mentioned them at the top of the show, Wet and Wild, the team of Sunny Beach and Steve Ray.
Oh my God. They go into detail about it. I think it's Steve Ray is the one that Herb Abrams just thought was going to be the next big Hulk Hogan level superstar in professional wrestling. The Dark Side of the Ring, they talk about that and they talk to him. He's fine. Like, Steve Ray is the equivalent of all those guys. I'm blanking on the names, but those guys in like late 80s trying to exist territories where there's a guy who's in good shape and is halfway decent and they push him as the top guy in the promotion. Steve Ray is that guy here. Sunny Beach, he is every bit as bad as Brian Donahue earlier on in this show, yet he is a pushed guy. I'm also amused that they call them Wet and Wild, but then they also call them throughout the show. There's several other just as bad names, but yet Wet and Wild is the name of this babyface tag team. I can't get there.
No, this was not good. It's like they're trying to have their version of the Dynamic Dudes.
Yes,
here.
100%.
Boy, but it's a Kirkland's version of the Dynamic Dudes, and that's saying something.
Sunny Beach, we talked about Brian Donahue looking like a mashup of Danny Spivey and Kurt Hennig. Here, Sunny Beach looks terrifyingly like a mashup of Danny Spivey and Bobby Heenan. Or excuse me, Bobby Eaton, not Bobby Heenan.
Yes.
He looks so much like Bobby Eaton. I cannot stress to you how bad Sunny Beach looks in this match. Like, I'm trying to think of a pushed main event level wrestler in a promotion that's either big time or trying to convince you they're big time, like a national promotion. I cannot remember too many guys who aren't the untalented sons of talented fathers that are this bad and yet are somehow getting pushed.
Yeah, this is like Nick Goulis's son vibes here.
Yes.
From this guy.
He throws the word. The best part is, I guess he thought maybe because this was the UWF, he thought maybe it was the other UWF, and he needed to throw leg kicks. Maybe he watched a Maeda match and got confused. So bad. And it's so strange because you've got, again, Steve Ray, who's fine. Sunny Beach is terrible. And then you've got Cactus Jack, who's already great. And then Bob Orton, who's just such a polished professional wrestling heel.
Sunny Beach is wrestling in a wetsuit that is like a tank top version of a wetsuit, and with it's like it's also short, like to the knees, and then arms exposed wetsuit. It starts with Cactus Jack in Sunny Beach. Beach hits a fall-away slam on Jack for a 2 count. Getting Orton in there with Steve Ray, and Steve Ray hits a small man big boot like he's a big guy.
Yes!
I howled with laughter.
I took those same notes in all caps. I feel like this is the cousin of the non-fat guy standing splash, which
Yes.
never lands. The fact that Steve Ray hit this average size man big boot, it was very, very funny. Right before that, there's a moment where, again, Sunny Beach has no idea what he's doing. So Orton awkwardly clotheslines him, and as he does it, he just kind of rides him all the way down to the mat just to make sure something happens out of this. Just awful.
Everything picks up for the positive when Cactus is back in. Ray with a crossbody off the middle rope. He goes right back up to the top with a crossbody, but Orton breaks up the pin. Jack misses a knee drop, so Wet and Wild start working over the leg of Cactus in boring fashion. The best part is Cactus Jack selling his leg, but these guys on offense cannot figure out how to work a body part. Like Sunny Beach is struggling to figure out what to do with the leg.
No, he, again, much like Brian Donahue earlier, he has no wrestling sense. He has no idea how to string anything together. He does not know why he's doing anything whatsoever. The highlight of this match by far is Bruno Sammartino, old man Bruno Sammartino at this point, with like a almost modern joke where he's like, he calls one of them Wet, like it's their name, and calls the other Wild, like it's the name. I'm like, holy crap, Bruno, I didn't know you had that in you. I howled with laughter. It made me so happy to hear Bruno cracking a fun joke like that.
The in-ring highlight of this is Cactus being whipped into the ropes, and he collapses because his knee is injured, and he's down on the bad leg. And I love that spot every single time I see it. No matter who does it, I'm in. I love it every single time. Cactus hits a discus lariat and then tags Orton back in. The referee is like annoyingly in the way, and then it finally makes sense as Orton reverses a whip into the corner and sends Ray into the referee, squashing him in the corner. Leading up to that, I'm like, why is this referee like annoyingly in the way? Move.
It reminds me of like, I don't know if they still are like this because I haven't watched the UFC in so long, but like a UFC ref when they're right in on the action way too much. That's what this is like. Again, this man could not have been younger than 80 years old. And appropriately enough, this referee's name was Amos.
Yes,
This guy was not he was not spry. I was terrified that he took this bump here. We should note when Bob Orton came in, it was shocking because this guy, again, with the people they're up against, particularly Sunny Beach, who's so terrible, Orton tags in, and he's just doing the most basic stuff imaginable, but he's doing it with so much aggression and intensity that it looks like the best professional wrestling you've ever seen by comparison to that like 3 or 4 minutes of Beach and Ray on offense.
All 4 men are in when the ref's down. Another referee hits the ring and throws out the match. Orton tries to hit Beach with the surfboard that he brought out to the ring, but somehow the referee, this other referee who looks like Father Time,
he's older than Amos.
He's older than Amos. Yes.
Imagine someone being just imagine one human being older than another man named Amos.
Yes, this referee who looks like Father Time is able to pull an entire surfboard away, wrestle it away from Orton. This is hilarious.
Epic old man strength. This, you could hear, this is a bag of bones wrapped in skin. You could hear him rattling as he tried to take this board away.
Thank goodness Orton got the board back, and he hits Ray with the surfboard. The babyfaces are left laying, and they're announced that they're the winners by disqualification.
Yes, the match ends. The show ends with Herb Abrams screaming, "The UWF, the pinnacle in sports programming."
Favorite thing on this show, Adam?
Oh, God. I mean, it might be what the gif is. Terry Gordy just having enough of Captain Bad and murdering him. It definitely wasn't John Tolos 4 times on the show. I would say my favorite thing on this show was, again, all Terry Gordy. Terry Gordy trying not to crack up in the background. But, like, objectively, the best thing on the show was the recap of the Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Paul Orndorff feud leading to next week's cage match.
Honorable mention for in-ring action. Best thing, Paul Orndorff's pile driver, honorable mention, and Cactus Jack and Bob Orton as a team willing a pro wrestling match out of Wet and Wild.
Yeah, when I was watching Bob Orton here, I'm like, why was Bob Orton not in 1991 WCW? There were a lot of worse guys there. I would have killed for a Z-Man and Brian Pillman defending the U.S. tag titles against Cactus Jack and Bob Orton on an episode of WCW Pro Chicago.
Worst thing on this show. Lot to choose from.
I would say it's John Tolos telling us that they're bringing 50s wrestling back. I would say the shadiest thing on this show is every commercial demanding that you send your check or money order to 702 Washington Street in Marina Del Rey.
And I think Mr. Donahue is also honorable mention for just being a terrible pro wrestler.
Yeah, I would say that. And I would say more than him because he's a jobber, and the jobbers on these shows were barely trained clearly.
Sunny Beach.
The Sunny Beach, and particularly the 3 or 4 minutes of Sunny Beach and Steve Ray doing limb work was just objectionable.
Oh, and with that, another territory, another promotion that we had not seen is in the books.
Well, would you, because these new old promotions we haven't reviewed before. One of the things we always like to think about is if you had never seen wrestling before, if you were a 10-year-old me or a 13-year-old you or whatever age you were at that point, if you stumbled across this, would it have been enough to hook you on professional wrestling? If I stayed through to the point of the Dr. Death Orndorff video package, or if I just stumbled upon it at that point, 100%. If I had just stumbled on it when John Tolos was telling us how boring this was going to be, I would have believed him and put cartoons back on.
Yeah, it would be hard to say. Wrestling on TV at a time where I would take any content I could get. Yes. Would I have given it a go? Yeah, probably. But would I seek it out? Be like, oh, UWF. It's not like Global when that was. I was like, oh, that was appointment television. Like,
gotta
watch
watch
a wrestling company, and it's
awesome. Watch the Cartel. I gotta see Lightning Kid and Jerry Lynn going at it.
No. There's nothing like that where you had to say, wow, I'm gonna track down whenever UWF was gonna show back up on my TV. No thanks.
I think that's fair.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. You mentioned the gifts. You mentioned our social media. Make sure you're following us at Wrestle at Random on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Threads, X, Twitter, Blue Sky. We're on all of them at Wrestle at Random, Facebook.com/Wrestling at Random as well. all the links, the entire back catalog of this podcast. If you're just joining the free feed right now, you've got over 100 episodes right now for free in the back catalog that are all new to you. It's all evergreen content. Go take a listen. Go all the way back to some of these prior episodes. Enjoy some of the shows we've reviewed from all kinds of time periods. Take a look at the back catalog. You'll be blown away. And if you want more, don't forget that bonus content over at the Patreon, patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom. And with that, we're calling it a podcast. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Herb Abrams. Feels like a weird thing to say, but without that, we would have never gotten 4 segments of John Tolos in 1991. God knows we needed it.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening. And we'll talk to you again